All right, Brother Jim. This is the Did That Really Happen podcast, and I'm going to tell you exactly how this came to be.
Okay.
Because I think I would have eventually, once I found out you were in Sevierville, I would have already put two and two together and wanted to do this.
Yeah.
But I did not realize you had moved to Sevierville yet.
Right, yes. We, our daughters thought that we had reached an age where we didn't need to be alone and said that we needed to be closer to them, so we moved into Courtney's basement. That's pretty close.
Well, hey, a basement? Courtney would put you in a basement.
Oh,
that is
it's
just...
not bad. They throw food down.
Nice.
Yeah.
They unlock it once a day.
We
Once
get
a
to
day.
come upstairs. I think it's an hour a day.
An hour a day? Man, of rec time? Do they call it rec time? Is that...
I don't know what they call it. But I think
walk
they
the
spell
yard.
that with our presence there, W-R-E-C-K, I think.
Well, it was 5:59 p.m. on a Thursday, June 27th, 2024,
Yeah,
that Joel Danley sent me the following email.
right.
I have a suggestion for a special episode of Did That Really Happen? Jim Dearman recently resigned to move to Sevierville as an elder here, and we had the opportunity to honor him, and it was less of a roast. He said, I had the opportunity to roast Jim. And he said it was less of a roast and more of a chance to read some sweet notes that people had sent in and tell a few funny stories about him. But the one thing that I regretted was that Mr. Jim has several of his go-to stories that he's told over the years, primarily at the Smoky Mountain Marriage Retreat,
Right.
that have never been recorded or put in a format where they'll be able to live on. And if you didn't attend the marriage retreat when he was MC, then you probably haven't heard him tell the stories as only Jim can. And here they were. The most famous involves his non-suicide note, so that's the first one we're going to have to ask you about. He apparently wants me to. There's also one about him falling into a display case in a shop of glass trinkets in Southeast Asia. One about him in an apartment or a hotel in Russia while doing mission work, when I think he pretended to have a Russian accent to try to avoid detection as an American. That one sounds really good. He used to tell several stories about his daughters getting him a stun gun as a gift. And then there was the year at the Smoky Mountain Marriage Retreat when he moonwalked, trying to talk about and describe his elliptical machine. And so he said, all I have to say is this. I think you have to have a special episode and just let Jim Dearman cook. And so we're going to call this episode Chef Jim Dearman's Cooking. So here's what I want to tell you. That the format of this show is very simplistic. Preachers have the distinct privilege to have some wackadoo stuff happen to them.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times people just don't believe that it's true. But this program seeks to give you an avenue to go on record and tell us what you're willing to tell us. We understand there's probably at least 20 stories that you can't tell. But whatever you can tell is what we're looking for here. And that's all I have to say on that. I'm going to let you start. Where would you like to begin of what he sent?
Well, actually, I don't really want any of these to live on. So we're done.
All right, guys, next week.
Shortest episode ever.
4 minutes long.
No. How long do we have?
As long as you take.
Oh, I see.
We really have about 27 more minutes, though, until Brother Brooks gets here.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't want to keep Brooks waiting. But, okay, the first one he mentioned was the non-suicide note. I don't have that with me, but I can kind of recount some of it. But that came about because we were moving from a townhome in Chattanooga over to Dunlap, and so everything was kind of in disarray, and a lot of stuff had been moved. But our grandson Seth was staying with us for a time while he was in school at UTC in the ROTC program. But he had moved to his own apartment, just a very short distance away, and he had a standard Airedale Terrier named Teddy. And he was going to go on an ROTC weekend, and he needed someone to come and stay at the apartment with Teddy on Saturday night. So I was chosen to do that. And so as I left the townhome, I thought, well, I'll be taking some pills before I go to bed, so I need some water. So I looked up in the cabinet above the counter, and I saw one of those Walmart, jugs, gallon jugs, but it had, just not too much water in it, but I thought that'll be enough to take my pills. I'll just grab that and take it with me. So I did, and about 11 o'clock that night at the apartment, I was getting ready to go to bed and go to sleep on the couch and keep Teddy company. So I put my pills in my mouth and turned that jug up. I thought I'd just drink out of the jug. Nobody else is. And when I did, my life flashed in front of me because it was not water. You see, what she had done was she had put some wax treatment on the floor, and she didn't like the way it turned out, so she had concocted or mixed a floor stripper to be able to take that off of there. And so it was that floor stripper that I took a big slug of, and that's when my life flashed in front of me. Wow. And I thought, I may die, and what do I need to do? And it was late, and I said, I don't want to call Janice. She's asleep. I'm sure I don't want to disturb her and upset her. Maybe I need to call the Poison Control Center. But I thought, well, no, I'll just go outside and breathe deeply and then get on the couch and hope for the best and pray, of course. And so,
of course.
And so, but then before I did, I thought, well, now what if I do die? If I die and they do an autopsy, they're going to think I poisoned myself. So I need to write a non-suicide note. And so I wrote a non-suicide note to my wife and basically told her what had happened, that I had grabbed a bottle that I thought was water. It was not under the sink where we normally keep cleaning stuff. It was up above the counter, but I don't want you to feel bad about that at all because it's not your fault. It was stupid of me, even though it was in a water bottle, to take a drink of that. And so that was, basically the gist of the note,
right?
Which I ended with, P.S. If you're reading this note in the morning, it means you'll need to take the dog out. So that was the non-suicide note, the gist of it.
Loved it.
There, And let's see, and then of course the Singapore story, where I had a little mishap. We went back to Malaysia after a 30-year absence or so. And for a lectureship at Four Seas College, Janice
Right.
and I went.
Right.
And then I was to preach a meeting in Klang, Malaysia, where we had worked. And it was delightful to be there. But Billy Bland was in the group we were with in Singapore. And we took a day off, as you often do, when you're on a mission trip, went into Chinatown. And Janice and one of the other members of the group were across the street, and I told Billy, let's go across the street. There's a shop over there. I want to get me a Singapore cap, a baseball cap. So he said, okay, so we did, and we walked around the shop. But when we came back to the front of the shop, there was just a little step down there that I didn't see because it was small, but it was large enough that it threw me forward. And I was off balance and moving forward. And I couldn't stop myself, and so I ran into a circular metal display that was filled with little metal magnetic trinkets from, Singapore. And I embraced that display case, and we kept going. And we ran into another display case full of women's scarves, and then we kept going, and then I hit the wall. And when everything hit the wall, I fell backwards and couldn't brace myself and hit my head on the floor.
Yeah.
And, you remember the old Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons? Yep. And you remember the coyote would have something terrible happen to him when he was trying to get the Roadrunner. And then once it initially happened, he would think, okay, that's it. And then what he had, not anticipated was another big rock coming down and hitting him after that.
Right.
Well, that was my Wile E. Coyote moment, because while I was lying there trying to assess my injuries and see how I was, and I was bleeding some, I looked up, and there was the metal case that I had initially hit coming down on me, and I had no time to get my arms up, and so it hit me right in the face.
Oh.
And Janice and the other member of our team heard the commotion from across the street in the middle of Chinatown. That's how loud it was. It sounded, she said, like a plane crash. And she came out of the shop she was in and looked across, and she saw Billy Bland, who was kneeling down, but she couldn't see me, and she thought, Billy, what's happened to Billy? And then it occurred to her, where's Jim? And she came over, and sure enough, I was there and hurt. They said, can we call an ambulance? I said, no. And then I said, I'll be fine. And Billy was very concerned initially. But then once he realized I was going to be okay, he thought, he said one of his, typical Billy Bland comments. He said, you know something, Jim, if it hadn't been for your nose, that metal thing would have hit you right in the face.
Leave it to Brother Bland.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And they brought me they said, you want some water? And I said, yeah, that'd be good. So they brought me a bottle of water that had just about a quarter of it left in there.
Oh no!
And I foolishly, because I didn't want to hurt him out of his feelings, I foolishly took a swig of that too. And one of my daughters said later, Daddy, why did you do that? Why didn't you just take some and splash it on your face? I said, well, that's excellent thought in retrospect, but And then when we left there, I was sick as a dog. When we came back, I had pneumonia, actually, by the time we got back from Malaysia. I don't know if the bottled water had anything to do with it or not. But
I thought you were going to say, and it was stripping floor wax again.
No.
Second time.
No, it was really water, but I didn't know where it had been.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the Singapore experience.
I love that both of these so far is testament to your mentality that I'll be fine. You drink poison, basically.
Yeah, right.
And instead of saying, I'm going to call poison control, you go, I'm going to go outside and breathe a little bit.
I probably should write a note.
And then I'll write a note just in case I
Just
die.
yeah.
I've not met many people like that, but I'm honored to know one.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. I'm glad you consider it an honor and not a detriment. And then, so what was the other one? The Russia situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was when I was still with Truth for the World, and we were trying to get the program. No, well, it was Sound Words, I guess, back then. We're trying to get the TV program on in Russia, and so I went over with a group, mission group, and I did some preaching in the group, but I also was trying to meet with television station executives when I could to get the program on. That's what I was doing. And Ronnie Morrison, who is an Arkansas boy, a gospel preacher, he and I were traveling together because he was checking on the different groups from Southern Christian at the time, as it was Southern Christian back then. They were in different places, and we would go from place to place where he could check on the groups, see how they were doing, but I could also try to make connections for the TV program. So we were traveling together. But Ronnie snored like crazy. And when he was a snorer, and when we would get to a place, I would try desperately to get to sleep before he did,
Right.
so that I could sleep. But, of course, when you try that, it generally doesn't work out. So when we finally got back to Syktyvkar, Russia, I said, Ronnie, hotel rooms are really cheap. I'm going to get one by myself because I need some sleep. So we got rooms across the hall from each other. But we had been told, don't make it obvious that you are Westerners because, there could be some Russian mafia or whoever over there. So be safe as possible. So on one occasion, after we had our rooms, I was coming out of my room to go across the hall to his room to get him to go eat, I guess. And as I was about to knock on his door and just did, I looked to my right, and down the hall were two men who looked like they were part of the Russian mafia. They just looked like hitmen to me. So I thought, So when I knocked and he said, "Who is it?" I said, "Jim. It's Jim." And he said, "Who?" I said, "Jim. Jim." And he said, "Who is that? Who is that?" And Ronnie talked. He had a pretty good Southern accent. Who is that? Well, I finally, after about 3 efforts saying, "Jim," I finally decided he wasn't going to open the door. So after my last "Jim," and he said, "Who is that?" I said, "It's me, Ronnie. Open the door." Yeah, so I gave up.
Oh man, what a time to find out though that you can sound Russian.
Oh yes,
You know?
yes. Yeah,
That was the first time I'm assuming you've ever attempted.
I think so, and the last.
It's a bold move, Say,
Yeah, that's right.
we're gonna figure this out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So what's with the stun gun?
Oh well, just with the stun gun was as a matter of fact, it was started when I was emceeing the marriage retreat, and Wes Hazel was our guest speaker at that time, that year. And he, in one of his speeches, he was talking about his wife, Shelley, I believe is her name, that he said, she is just ready to go at 11 o'clock. She's just still wired, and I am just sleepy and ready to go to sleep. So I told him, I said, I have a solution for that, Wes. It's called a stun gun. And our daughters had given us, when you get old, they do things like this.
Sure.
They gave us stun guns because they thought that'd be good protection. But the thing about the stun gun, and it got to be a running joke every year at the marriage retreat pretty much, I would bring my stun gun, and when you set that thing off, it gets people's attention,
right?
Because it crackles real big.
That's right.
But I told people, I said, I got real excited when the girls gave us a stun gun because I thought, hey, some guy's coming at me. I just point that thing at him, and I'll say, you're done for.
Right.
And I stun him. But then I realized that's not the way the stun guns work that they gave us. You have to be in contact with the person in order to use it. So I thought, how much good is that going to do me? But then I realized it had a flashlight on it. So I could flash the flashlight at him and say, follow that light, and when you get here, I'm going to do you.
There's some pretty foolish people out there that'll be like, okay,
That's right.
see what happens.
Coming in.
That's right.
There might be money there. You don't know. That's good.
Yeah.
And then you moonwalked too?
Well, that was just a kind of a spur of the moment where I lost my mind completely, because we were just demonstrating my elliptical machine, and so I just attempted to move. It wasn't too bad actually. Yeah, but you had to be there.
Had to be there.
Yeah.
If we were videoing, we'd have to ask for a display.
Yeah.
I still want to see it.
that.
Yeah.
We can describe it. We could just tell people this is something you have to see to believe.
Yeah.
Now, how long ago was that you moonwalked?
Oh, me. It was the year that Janice was sick and couldn't come with me.
Okay.
And people told, and she determined she was going to be with me
From
then
now on,
no
yeah.
matter how sick she was.
Probably smart. Probably smart. That's
good.
The one year she doesn't go, you
Yeah,
moonwalk all
I
over the
moonwalk.
place.
Yeah,
That's
moonwalk, yeah.
certainly not like the one we know with Jim Dearman. So, well, Jim, do you have anything you want to add? Anything else you want to say?
No, actually, I'd like to delete all of that if we could.
Well,
It's for a small
unfortunately,
price.
we do have a fee in order to do that.
Oh,
and
I see.
it is 3 off-the-record stories that you will tell on the record. No, thank you so much. The Bible tells us there's a time to laugh.
That's right.
And so we created this program here at Scattered Abroad so that we could kind of highlight ministers specifically, though not all of our guests have been preachers. Most of them have been. And the fact that I remember being a young boy and going to all these lectureships and sitting at the dinner table and hearing Brother Taylor and Brother Elkins and others tell these stories, I just remember thinking, they're making this up. They're just for fun, and dramatic sake.
Yeah.
They're saying, yeah, this happened. And then I became a preacher, and I had a few stories happen myself, and I thought, oh, this is just standard practice.
Well, and then, and it just came to mind when you go overseas to do mission work too, and the culture shock and the differences there. Like when we first went to Malaysia, Charlie Chan, who was our sponsor to get us in, he had a driver who was an Indian driver named Robbie, and they were showing us around Kuala Lumpur, and Charlie said, I got to stop in here. I've got a business stop to do. So Robbie turned around to the back seat where Janice and I were sitting in, and he said, are there many Sikh people in the U.S.? And I said, oh, yeah. I said, we have a lot of sick people over there. I said, but I said, I understand you have pretty good hospitals over here. And Janice hit me with her elbow and said, he's talking about the Sikhs, the Indians. And he did look really confused when I answered that way.
You answer like, yeah, those people sicken me. I just can't stand them.
You do have some experiences like that as well.
I did say once in Cape Town, South Africa, I said, you'll never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul. And no one knew what that meant. They were looking at me like,
never seen that.
What is a U-Haul? We don't know that brand.
That's
right. And I was like, you have KFC but not U-Haul? Come on. What?
That's right. Yeah.
But Jim, thank you so much for doing this, especially coming out of your way this week and doing that, putting us into your schedule.
Oh, glad to do.
Thank you, brother.
We appreciate you, and I think that, Good News Today should have a segment called, Unsound Mind, and you tell these stories about all the things that have happened to you and how you've somehow managed to come through on the other side.
Instead of sound words, it could be unsound mind.
Yes. And you could say, I don't know how my mind is still working, but the Lord provides. You can always tie it
It's
back
always
in.
pretty good therapy, at least to get it out there,
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Then you can go delete it if you need to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, Brother Jim, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Wayne had to be here, so I'm not going to thank him. He's kind of obligated to be. But also, it's kind of the running joke. Every episode, I tell Wayne to kick rocks. So now you've heard that. Wayne, I love you, buddy. Next week, we'll have our other guest here, Chris Butler, doing a Did That Really Happen? And we will look forward to that on the Scattered Abroad Network. You can find all the information, and we'll include Good News Today's info in these 2 episodes. That way we can advertise that down in our show notes. And just make sure you say a lot of good things about Jim Dearman, not Mark Teskey, okay? we want Jim getting all of the praise, not my father-in-law. All righty. Until then, take care, and God bless.